Grain, really, production of corn and soybeans is killing America. It's eroding 75% of our topsoil is gone. Jared Diamond says every culture that collapses because they kill their topsoil. And it's all down in the Gulf of Mexico.
If you look at the Midwest, where most of the corn and soybeans are grown, the great bulk of it is fed to animals. If they were out on pasture, we would need far less grain. If they were out on pasture, we wouldn't have the problems with the pollution of the feedlots and the air quality problems.
You've heard about methane, that cattle are the biggest polluters in the world. No, they're not, but the ones in feedlots are.
In actual fact, global climate change began thousands of years ago when humans removed most of the large herding herbivores from the grasslands and savannas of the world and replaced their role with fire, which is completely unnatural. So we have what is the biggest problem facing humanity. It's inconceivable that there's any other problem even approaching it, this one of biodiversity loss, desertification, global warming. And tragically, scientists are treating them as three separate issues and trivializing at least the core one of biodiversity loss.
The negative feedback loops are about to occur at any moment. We don't know when, and they probably are starting to in subtle ways, but those big switching changes that could happen at 350 or 381 parts per million, 381.2 parts per million, they could happen at any time, so we don't know. And so our adaptation efforts, our consumption patterns, all of those sorts of things are important, but the most important thing that we need to do immediately is retrofit agriculture around the planet, and the cheapest and easiest way to do that is to get the cows out of the sheds and to get them roaming across the landscape in managed herds, and do that in perennial grasslands. There is no better way of turning this whole thing around. It's the least energy in for the most result out. I'm absolutely convinced of that. And I've seen enough results from the holistic management movement around the world and all of the people who are doing other stuff that's aligned with holistic management to see, well, that's obvious. It's low on things and it's high on results. So, in terms of restoring carbon and mineral cycles, water cycles.
The animal impact tool has just been amazing, what can be done.
And I have come to the conclusion that the only tool we have that will heal land is animal impact.
I've gotten past worrying about trampling it because I've realized even if it gets trampled, I didn't lose it. It's not lost. It's not gone. It's doing me some good. It's getting on the soil surface. It's building soil. It's providing litter. It's habitat for microbes. It helps me retain moisture so I'll have even more grass next time. So I'm not losing anything by letting those cattle graze in the wintertime. I'm actually enhancing things.
Just 1 or 2% more organic matter in the soil would sequester all the nasty carbon that we put up there. Let's put it back in the earth where it belongs. What does that better than grass? Nothing.
The litter increases, the organic matter increases. I've got some of my meadows now 7, 8, 9% organic matter. Humus holds like 4 to 6 times its own weight in water. So it's just like a sponge. When it rains, it sucks up water, retains it for later.
The key thing is the soil surface. Whether you're looking at solar energy flow or nutrient cycle or water cycle or biological community dynamics, if you can keep the soil covered, it tends to be forgiving and come right. Now when you look at millions of acres as you've got in the United States and Australia and all over Africa and China and Pakistan, India, etc., where you've got millions and millions of acres of predominantly bare soil between the plants, even though it may look like a grassland. If you look down between the plants, there are only 2 things that cause that. And they are too few animals wandering around and or fire.
It's like a jellyfish. If you whack a jellyfish with a paddle, you don't kill the jellyfish. You now get 10 new jellyfish. And that's the way the grass crowns are. They're like a jellyfish, and they need to be divided. Well, how does nature divide them? It divides them with aggressive hoof action that only occurs when there is hoof excitement from a mob moving.
They do not survive unless they have some form of replenishment, some form of disturbing the site so that the plants can germinate. You have to have some kind of surface disturbance.
The thing that's interesting about grasslands in the world is that they're disturbance-dependent ecosystems. There's no grasslands around that exist in the absence of disturbance. Disturbance being flooding, fire, herbivory, or some combination thereof.
And you see all this very white, sparse, feathery felt. That's annuals, that's deterioration. This is currently recovering, but slowly. And the slow recovery is because we've stopped the overgrazing, but we haven't stopped the overresting. So that's characteristic of land, that the dominant influences over the last goodness knows how many years have been overresting, burning to combat the effects of the overresting, and then minimal, absolutely minimal overgrazing. Again, it's resulted in this very low production land that you see just in that shot right there.
Education, that's where we keep coming back to that point, you know. It's up to us to transmit the new message of the new paradigm where we need more animals in our lands.
It's the dynamic things of nature that we are missing, that we are failing to understand.
A lot of people think, well, when you concentrate the cattle, you're going to beat it all out. But here, these paddocks, this paddock particularly, the very desirable grasses are growing right up to the center and even into the cell center, into this very small corridor here. So contrary to what many of us think before getting into cell grazing and concentrating the cattle more than we were used to, this initial area here that gets beat out the most actually ends up being the healthiest and most productive.
A 400-year-old tree it's easy to see that age because it's really big and tall and has a big trunk on it and you can go hug it. But I mean, so there's a lot of tree huggers out there. I'm a grass hugger too, right? I want to wrap my arms around a big old fat bunch grass and snuggle it and rub it up because it's like amazing to think that this being has just been in this place doing that work for 500 years.
Now look at this one perennial right here. Look at the color, the broadness of the leaves on that. Now that perennial shows you that there's nothing whatsoever wrong with this land. All we got to do is get that perennial in, and then better ones, because that perennial is adapted to fire.
One of the incredible things about a natural ecosystem is the scale at which they operate. They're working on the scale of minutes and millimeters, capturing those resources that feed the livestock, for example, or the humans. The whole ecosystem is what they're feeding, really. And then, of course, when humans took over with our annual agriculture, beginning, 8 to 10,000 years ago, we had to become these sort of sloppy macro managers. Our scales that we can work on are more on the order of square kilometers and seasons, not minutes and millimeters. We simply have not evolved to deal with very dynamic processes 6 to 10 to 15 feet down in the soil. These plants do that, and of course that's how these large herds, whether we're talking about the bison of North America or the wildebeest in Africa, they got their energy off these perennial plant communities.
You don't see what's possible. It's somehow people just go a certain amount and get satisfied with what they've got, and what they've got is pathetic. Mm-hmm. When you look at it, what that land is capable of.
I'm really hopeful that as we get more results that are more apparent for everyone to see on the ground, it is going to help not only Zimbabwe, but the rest of the world.
The smart thing is to look at nature and let the animal do what it does naturally. And that's great.
Disturbance, as far as I can tell, is really one of the hallmarks or the keystones of ecological land management, is the question becomes, are you a regenerative disturber or a degenerative disturber?
This herbivore pasture relationship has been built in from design.
What is the most natural thing for animals? Natural behavior is to go out and graze.
You got a very healthy biological system going there with the animal waste, the hoofs, the soil, the microbes, the sun, and you're actually building topsoil. That's where the prairie land came from.
Well, one thing I think too about like using livestock to improve land or grazing as a total system, why it counts for such a small amount, because there's really nothing much to sell you. You know, it's all management. You know, cows eat feed and cycle back stuff. I mean, really, what else is there?
In a world where we have $150 a barrel oil, and repair costs and purchase costs on equipment have skyrocketed, you know, I want to try to minimize those kind of expenses. So letting the animal do the work is just the natural progression in the thinking.
Rather than being cooped up in a confinement structure where we're having to bring them feed and then cart out the manure and urine, the energy flow completely changes when the animal is moving itself, when it is self-harvesting, when it is self-fertilizing. Suddenly, all we are is just kind of a stage manager, basically, saying, okay, actors, move to stage left, move to stage right. We put up a little bit of this almost invisible electric fence, each day, and have little, invisible water lines and a little stock tank, and we move that around with a little four-wheeler, and the whole thing just runs in this beautiful symbiotic relationship on essentially solar and instinctual energy inputs.
This is critical work that has got the capacity of changing the world.
If we close down the damn feedlots and get the cattle back out onto the range and out onto farms where they belong, you'd have a huge change